What happens when the 7-time world champion describes a career as the worst I have lived? Today we unravel a story of frustration, failed technique, and an adaptation that seems to go in the opposite direction. The 2025 Spain Grand Prix was not just another career in the Formula One calendar. For Lewis Hamilton, it was the scene of a brutal revelation. The man who has conquered 7 world titles, who has raised the rod of performance in the hybrid era, and who came to Ferrari with the promise of an epic redemption, lived what he himself publicly called the worst career I have lived. A sentence full of despair but also of a dangerous subtext. Emotional disconnection with a project that still does not meet 6 months of life. Barcelona, a traditionally technical and demanding circuit, offered ideal conditions to measure the true state of symbiosis between Hamilton and its SF-25. And the first signs were not entirely negative. Saturday's classification seemed to offer a hint of hope. Lewis was 5th, just behind the dominant cars of McLaren, Red Bull, and his own companion Charles Leclerc. It was just the 2nd time in 9 weekends that managed to beat Leclerc on a return, and this seemed to confirm an improvement in his adaptation process. But then Sunday came. The day everything collapsed. In the start, Hamilton had a precise, clean reaction, advancing George Russell in Curve 1 with a surgical maneuver, placing room. It was literally the only moment of the weekend where it seemed to have control. From that point, a progressive descent began, almost painful to observe. The difference in rhythm with Leclerc grew back to turn. In just 10 turns, Ferrari activated a team order, exchange of positions. Hamilton could not defend himself. I didn't have what? These types of decisions, although tactical, have a symbolic load. When a pilot such as Hamilton is strategically removed from the fight without even making a clear mistake, internal reading is evident. It is no longer the alpha of the team. And the most alarming, it doesn't even seem to have the tools to aspire to that role. As the race advanced, Lewis was not only exceeded by the pointers, but began to be attacked by pilots in the middle zone. While Leclerc fought for the podium, Hamilton fell into a descending spiral that led him to battle against Haas, Williams cars, and finally Sauber. The climax of the disaster came in the penultimate return. Nico Hülkenberg, pilot of a team that has not yet left the basement of the grille, with a car described by its own engineers as extremely difficult to drive, surpassed it on the main line without resistance. It was a technical overtaking, yes, favored by the state of the tires. But it was also a powerful image. The champion, the icon, reduced to easy damn. For Hamilton, these types of scenes are not only difficult to assimilate, they are humiliating. Each advancement feels like a betrayal of the car that promised resurrection, but delivers frustration. His body language when lowering the SF-25 said more than any interview. Low head, lost look, slow steps. There was no anger, only resignation. And when he spoke, he did it with a brevity that froze the entire press. What do I rescue from this race? 0. No additional word. There was no technical analysis, no tactical excuses. Only empty. That void, however, is not born on a single Sunday. It is the result of a cumulative process. Hamilton is discovering that Ferrari is not Mercedes, that their influence, their environment, their work philosophy do not fit so naturally in Montmeló, and that, for the first time in many years, Formula One is showing him his cruelest face, that of failure without clear explanation. This emotional and sports collapse is not a simple bump. It is a symptom. A crack in the redemption narrative that many, including him, dreamed at the beginning of this season. And that crack, if it is not sealed soon, can destroy everything Ferrari and Hamilton aspire to build. Ferrari knew from the first test in Bahrain that the SF-25 was not a simple car. It was fast, yes, but also capricious. It required surgical precision at the curve entrance and a special sensitivity to handle wear in long steins. And while Charles Leclerc, molded by years of learning within the Scuderia, adapted as a violinist to his Stradivarius, Lewis Hamilton seemed to be playing a completely different melody. The core of the problem is in the driving style. Hamilton comes from a decade of symbiosis with Mercedes, where his way of braking late and aggressively, his ability to play with the weights of the car, and his confidence to force traction in the curve exit were his most sharp weapons. But the SF-25 does not tolerate that. Its mass distribution, its aerodynamic operating window, and especially its brake balance and front axle temperature are designed for a different approach. Release the accelerator in advance, travel with faster minimal speed in curve, and dose with surgical precision the traction at the exit. Just what Leclerc has been perfecting for years. Lewis, to many surprise, tried to adapt. He even confessed before the Australian Grand Prix that was modifying his style to approach Charles. Changes in telemetry revealed that I was stopping before, adjusting turning points and altering its way of drawing medium curves. But the theory is not enough when the car does not respond. In Barcelona, that lag became more evident than ever. During the middle stint, when most pilots were maximizing the career rhythm with soft compounds, Hamilton began reporting loss of rear adhesion. The team responded with minor adjustments from the wall, but the car's behavior remained erratic. Finally, Fred Vasseur, in subsequent statements, confirmed that there was a technical problem not specified in the SF-25 of Lewis. He did not give details. It was not mentioned whether it was hydraulic, electronic, or a software anomaly, but it was clear that, in that last stretch of the race, the car simply stopped responding to the pilot's orders. That lack of control is devastating for someone like Hamilton. He doesn't need a perfect car, but he does need one to respond. And when you cannot even trust that when pressing the accelerator the car will react as you wait, the most vital element in elite motoring is lost: the man-machine connection. That mismatch goes beyond cockpit. He also talks about a structural problem within Ferrari. Because if your car behaves radically differently for two pilots of the same team, the problem is not only the pilot suffering. It is a symptom of a development that prioritizes one over another. Not necessarily pleased, but by inertia. The team has evolved around Leclerc's style for years. Modifying that in a few months so that Hamilton also works is an almost impossible challenge. And here another key element enters: adaptation management. Hamilton is not new in this. He has changed equipment before, has piloted difficult cars. But in Ferrari it does not seem to be receiving feedback and support you need. Decision-making in the race has been inconsistent. Adjustments between little effective sessions, and often not very reactive strategies. The work environment, although full of enthusiasm, is not yet calibrated to optimize a pilot like him. The result is the worst possible scenario: a car that does not respond, a strategy that does not protect it, and a public narrative that puts it in the center of scrutiny. Hamilton is caught in a technical storm that goes beyond its control. And the worst thing is that it seems to be fighting that battle alone. The consequences of what happened in the Spain Grand Prix are not limited to a frustrating afternoon or a handful of lost points. What was lived in Barcelona has the potential to completely redefine Ferrari's narrative for the rest of the 2025 season. And the most delicate thing is that the tension is no longer found only between the car and the pilot. It has begun to leak in the relationship between Hamilton and Maranello's own structure. From the beginning, this union was seen as a historical alliance. Not because of the technical logic of the moment, but because of the symbolic magnitude. Ferrari, the most legendary team of Formula One, with the most successful pilot of the hybrid era. A synergy designed to break droughts, to rebuild myths, to send a message to the paddock. Glory is still possible. But that narrative, so powerful on paper, is hanging today with a thread. And that thread is trust. For Hamilton, trust is not a matter of blind faith. It is the result of feeling that each effort, every return, each adjustment, each conversation and briefing has a tangible impact on track. But when the solutions do not arrive, when the problems are repeated, and when the car ceases to be an ally, that delicate emotional bond begins to erode. And when a pilot like Hamilton, accustomed to fighting for everything, begins to feel that he does not have control of his destiny, the risk of rupture shoots. The problem for Ferrari is double. On the one hand, they have a pilot who is not only disconnected from the car, but begins to seem disconnected from the team. And on the other, they have Charles Leclerc, who has been strengthened as the technical and emotional reference point of the project. This generates an imbalance that can become a silent threat: the lack of shared leadership. If the situation is not corrected, Ferrari runs the risk of repeating errors from the past. When the structure is fragmented between two poles, when decisions begin to unconsciously favor one, and when the other feels that it is not heard, the global performance suffers. The team has already lived similar chapters in its modern history, and the results were always disastrous. The 2019 memory with Vettel and Leclerc is not so far. And now, with even greater media pressure for the presence of Hamilton, the margin of error is null. In addition, the 2025 season does not allow truces. McLaren has begun strong, Red Bull, despite his structural crisis, continues to count on Verstappen's talent, and Mercedes, with Russell and Antonelli, stalks with a worrying constancy. If Ferrari loses points due to internal conflicts, for execution errors, or for not adapting their car to both pilots, the championship will escape before the summer break. And then there is the other big question: how much more time will Hamilton endure? Not in contractual terms, but in psychological terms. Because if this dynamic is maintained, if you still feel that you cannot compete at the level that your name and your legacy demand, you can begin to contemplate decisions that previously seemed unthinkable. An early withdrawal. an agreed output, or even a political role within the paddock, slowly moving away from active competition. When a pilot like Lewis Hamilton pronounces the words, "the worst career I have lived," is not simply evaluating a bad Sunday. He is trialing all his surroundings. He is looking towards his box, towards his engineers, towards his technical direction, and is saying without saying it, "This is not working." And when those words come from someone who has won in Monaco with 3 wheels, who has traced from the bottom in Silverstone, and who has survived years of titanic battles against Vettel, Rosberg and Verstappen, the weight is devastating. The 2025 Grand Prix will be remembered not by a victory, not for a brilliant overtaking, but for the moment a champion broke. And that break was not just on the track. It was in his competitive spirit, in your trust, in his role within a team that hired him as Salvador, and that, until now, he has not lived up to his promise. But this story still does not end. Because if Hamilton has demonstrated in his career, he does not give up easily. He has come out of darker wells, has silenced more hard critics, and has rebuilt his path with surgical patience. But to do it this time, he needs something he still does not have: a Ferrari willing to change. A Ferrari who not only understands his needs, but reconfigured to respond to them. Not as a favor, but as a strategic decision. The paddock knows it. The rivals observe it. McLaren smiles with the tactical advantage. Red Bull, although in crisis, remains on the stalking. Mercedes, his former home, observes from the rearview mirror. But everyone knows something. If Ferrari does not react, if he does not rebalance his priorities, if he does not recover his champion, the rest of the season could be a parade of frustrations, uncomfortable silences, and results below the real potential of his alignment.